Welcome to this week's edition of World Crisis Radio. This is Webster Tarpley here in Washington, D.C., and this is our pre-Thanksgiving program, actually taped pre-Thanksgiving, but it will be on during the Thanksgiving weekend when people can spend some time catching up with the news. So we have a full program because of all the things that are happening. The world right now is marked by a convergence of crises. They all have to do with the world economic and financial depression and also some of the military strategic spin-offs of that, and indeed the march towards dictatorship, totalitarianism, the erosions of civil liberties, and so forth. But let's start at the top. The Irish zombie banks. This is not a sovereign debt crisis. This is a crisis of zombie banks that have succeeded in transferring their astronomical, unbelievable derivatives indebtedness in the range of, I'm sure, trillions of euros to the Irish government. So we've got that crisis going on, and the net effect is that it has relieved pressure on the dollar by driving the euro down even worse. We'll talk about all these stories in detail. Let me just tick them off. The Irish zombie banks, number one. A new circus in the border between North Korea and South Korea, obviously provoked by the South, provoked by the U.S. and this reactionary warmonger President Lee of South Korea. And this is the drill that has been going on there, the so-called Hoguk. So under cover of Hoguk, they staged this incident for various reasons. The U.S. depression rolls on. Sales of existing U.S. homes down 2.2%. Now, there are slightly fewer unemployed new claims this week, but this is simply a week-to-week seasonal fluctuation. We've also got reports, our fourth crisis, the FBI in the process of raiding various hedge funds and mutual funds. Now, so far, it looks like a typical FBI exercise. Go after some little fish to relieve pressure on the big fish. When I see Jamie Dimon in handcuffs, when I see Blankfein in an orange jumpsuit on Rikers Island, when we see Pandit the Bandit doing the perp walk, we'll take it seriously, but not as long as we're dealing with, admittedly, important hedge funds and mutual funds. But this is not J.P. Morgan Chase. J.P. Morgan Chase is the heart of the matter. And in terms of public opinion, I guess it's Goldman Sachs. So those two come out of it untouched, then it's a fraud. We had a meeting of the United States Financial Stability Oversight Board with Bonnie and Clyde, that is to say with Sheila Bair, the high priestess of Too Big to Fail, and Geithner, Tiny Tim TurboTax Geithner of the Treasury. And they informed us the interesting news that 850 U.S. banks are on the endangered list. There are 850 U.S. banks in a derivatives-induced death spiral. Derivatives often held by the large money center banks, maybe not so much by these banks. We've also got the fraud closure crisis, and we want to make a special challenge to the so-called Tea Party. You want to get some populist street creds? You claim that you're concerned about private property? Well, I've been wondering, whose private property? How about the private property of American middle-class homeowners who are having their houses stolen by zombie bankers working with corrupt judges, robo-signers, robo-judges, and they're now trying to get this entire monstrous swindle legalized ex post facto. In retrospect, they want to make this all legal with the help of a corrupt Congress. Where does the Tea Party stand? We haven't heard anything from the Tea Party. We heard Republicans defending BP against a shakedown. Old Joe Barton was so concerned about BP's private property. So what private property are we talking about? Are we talking about the so-called private property of zombie bankers who come with fraudulent paperwork and steal your house? Or are we talking about the American middle class and their right? Yeah, their right to have a home. We have that since the GI Bill. Thank you very much. That was one of the things that people fought for in World War II, and no zombie banker should be allowed to take it away. We're also expecting the Hariri report, the United Nations frame-up report on Lebanon, and it's clear now, ample leaks through various Canadian news media, that the goal, of course, has always been clear, starting with Detlef Melis, the tool of the U.S., famous for his work on the La Belle discotheque back in 1985 to allow Reagan to bomb Libya that year. They're going to pin it on Hezbollah, but there is no proof, and the process has been so corrupt that that it's impossible to accept. So those are the half a dozen or more, 6, 7, 8 crises, depending on how you want to count them, that are gripping the world here on the eve of Thanksgiving in the U.S., big holiday. So concerning where we stand, it's 1 year ago we had the beginning of what is called the sovereign debt crisis. That's the interesting chronology, right? September 2008, the zombie banks implode because of their derivatives, their credit default swaps, their collateralized debt obligations, their structured investment vehicles, and so forth. So that starts, the banking crisis starts the acute phase of this depression that we're in. 1 year ago began the phase that is sometimes called the sovereign debt crisis phase, except it's not really a sovereign debt crisis. It's still the banking crisis, except the zombie bankers have been able to transfer their debt to the sovereign states, right, shifting the bankruptcy onto the public, although sovereign states do not go bankrupt if they're well managed, and it's very easy to avoid bankruptcy if you happen to be a sovereign state. I can do it myself. The 1 year ago, we had the beginning of this with Dubai. 2 years ago, we had the Mumbai terrorist attacks. Remember those? And, of course, we've got this guy Headley. We've got a DEA, Drug Enforcement Administration provocateur, working for the U.S., undoubtedly working for the U.S. all the way, not turned, but loyalty stayed essentially with the DEA, now convicted for essentially being the organizer of this. How interesting. So the U.S. arranged for the Mumbai massacre through this combination double agent, patsy, whatever he is. Now, for the past, the past 2 or 3 months, say since about June, from June until September, we had another period of a falling dollar. We had another summer decline, a summer swoon of the battered greenback, right? And that came in the wake of the failure of the hedge fund attack on Greece using credit default swaps to promote the immediate breakup of the euro, which had been the goal in May. Remember, the flash crash of May 6th was a feature of an attack on the euro. And if you looked at the yen to euro that day, you would see that it closely tracked and mimicked the huge 1,000-point fall in the Dow, right? If the euro lost 10 points, 10% or whatever it was, then that was comparable to what was going on with the Dow, except they found that it was also bringing down the New York stock market and facing them with political problems that they chose not to go for at that time. So we're talking about the plunge protection team and its various satellites. So the dollar had been falling essentially from June, July into late September and early October. Now that has all changed. It has turned around, and the dollar has begun to gain ground again on the euro, starting in October and reaching now almost to the end of November. And the way that that is done is a speculative attack using credit default swaps on the sovereign debt of Ireland, Spain, and Portugal. And that is what has brought us to the current Irish crisis. And the International Monetary Fund has a modest proposal for Ireland, and we'll hear about that in just a minute here on World Crisis Radio.